The email arrived at 2:17 a.m. Subject: Your business is a fraud. I was asleep, dreaming of lavender and cypress, the scents of my best-selling candles. By 2:18, my entire world was burning. It wasn't just a bad review, it was a scorched earth manifesto, detailing fabricated lies about my products, my ethics, even my marriage, all posted across every platform imaginable. Have you ever felt your carefully built world crumble under a lie? Hit subscribe if you've ever had to fight for your truth, because mine was just beginning. I remember the exact moment the piece shattered. It was a Tuesday, the kind of crisp autumn morning that usually fills me with quiet joy. Sunlight streamed into my home studio, illuminating the delicate glass jars and the shimmering wax awaiting its fragrant destiny. My business, Ether and Ember, was more than just a venture. It was my sanctuary, a meticulously crafted world of bespoke candles and artisanal home fragrances. Every morning, I'd wake up before dawn, the quiet house filled only with the promise of creation. I'd measure essential oils, melt soy wax, and carefully pour, watching the liquid gold solidify into perfect, fragrant cylinders. Each candle wasn't just a product, it was a piece of my renewed spirit, a tangible manifestation of the calm I had finally found. After years of navigating a tumultuous past, finding my footing with Mark, my incredible husband, a software engineer with a calming presence, and pouring my heart into something tangible, I finally felt whole. Mark celebrated every small victory with me, from securing a new wholesale account to a glowing customer review. He'd bring me coffee in the studio, listen patiently as I described a new scent profile, and quietly handled the shipping labels on busy days. We'd built a life together that felt both solid and serene, a quiet haven far removed from the chaos I'd once known. My online store was thriving, orders flowing in steadily, my social media presence growing organically with genuine engagement. I hosted live workshops on Instagram, sharing tips on sustainable living and the art of scent blending. People loved the unique blends, the sustainable packaging, the story behind each scent. They left glowing reviews, sent heartfelt messages, and shared photos of my candles lighting up their homes. I was living the dream I hadn't even known I dared to dream. The first ripple wasn't a wave, just a tiny disturbance, a 1-star review on my Etsy shop, claiming a candle arrived broken and smelled like burnt sugar and disappointment. It was unusual, given my meticulous packaging and quality control, but I dismissed it. Accidents happen. I issued a refund immediately, sent a replacement, and tried to forget it. Then came another, on Instagram, a comment on a post about my new Forest Whispers collection. Overpriced junk. You can get better at the dollar store. I blocked the user, chalking it up to internet trolls. Every successful business attracts a few naysayers, right? Mark reassured me. Don't let them get to you, darling. Your work speaks for itself. His calm voice was usually enough to quell my anxieties, and for a while it worked. But the ripples soon became currents, then whirlpools. Negative comments proliferated with alarming speed and coordination. Not just reviews, but direct messages, sometimes crude and vulgar, sometimes vaguely threatening. They accused me of using cheap, toxic ingredients, of scamming customers, of being a fake artisan who copied others' work. Fake profiles, dozens of them, materialized across platforms. Candle Connoisseur 87, Truth Teller Girl, Eco Fraud Alert. My usually positive comment sections became battlegrounds. I found myself spending hours deleting comments, blocking accounts, and reporting them to platform moderators. But new ones would spring up almost immediately, like Hydra heads. It was like playing whack-a-mole with 1,000 hammers, each one striking at my livelihood, my passion. I started waking up with a knot in my stomach, dreading opening my laptop. The joy I once found in checking my sales reports evaporated, replaced by a morbid curiosity about what new attack awaited me. My hands started to tremble when I clicked on social media notifications. I found myself compulsively checking my phone, even in the middle of dinner with Mark, searching for new slurs, new fabricated stories. My focus in the studio wavered. I made small mistakes, mismeasuring oils, spilling wax. The creative flow, once a boundless river, now felt like a choked stream. Then the attacks turned personal, cutting deeper than any insult about my products. One review, posted on Google, accused me of stealing designs from legitimate artists and living off my rich husband's money, implying I was a gold digger. Another, on Yelp, hinted at a past relationship, something vague about leaving a trail of broken promises and broken hearts. My hands shook as I read them, the words burning themselves into my mind. These weren't random trolls. These were specific, pointed jabs, laced with a venom that felt deeply personal. The Eco Fraud Alert account even mentioned the specific brand of organic cotton wicks I used, a detail I'd only ever shared in an exclusive online forum for artisans. They knew things, or they thought they knew things that only someone close to me would know. The attacks were no longer just about ether and ember. They were about me. I started to scrutinize every comment, every profile, searching for a pattern, a common thread, a turn of phrase, anything that could reveal the identity of my tormentor. It was exhausting, a constant drain on my energy and creativity. Sleep became elusive, haunted by the phantom glow of screens and the echo of hateful words. Mark noticed my withdrawal, the dark circles under my eyes. He encouraged me to ignore it, to focus on the positive feedback. But how could I, when the negativity felt like a physical assault? The real blow landed when a major boutique in Charleston, the Gilded Quill, with whom I was negotiating a substantial wholesale contract, suddenly pulled out. The email was terse, coldly professional. Due to recent negative publicity and concerns regarding your brand's reputation, we've decided to postpone our partnership indefinitely. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just online noise anymore. This was tangible, devastating. Thousands of dollars gone. Months of negotiations, countless late nights perfecting samples, all wasted. Orders dropped sharply on my Etsy and Shopify stores. The financial strain, once an abstract worry, became a cold, hard fact. I stared at the email, the words blurring, a cold dread seeping into my bones. My dream, my sanctuary, was under attack, and I had no idea who was behind it or why. The thought that someone out there hated me enough to systematically destroy everything I had built filled me with a chilling mix of fear and confusion. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if invisible eyes were watching my every move, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. The carefully constructed piece of my life, the quiet happiness with Mark, felt like it was dissolving into thin air. This wasn't just a string of bad luck. This was deliberate. This was war. And I was entirely unprepared for the insidious enemy lurking in the shadows of my screen, an enemy who knew me better than any stranger should. The email from my biggest corporate client was terse, direct. Due to unforeseen circumstances and recent, concerning online activity regarding your business, we must regrettably withdraw our contract effective immediately. My hands trembled as I read it, the words blurring on the screen. The initial trickle of bad reviews and snide comments had become a torrent, a digital avalanche burying my dream. Sales plummeted by over 60% in a single week. My social media feeds, once vibrant with customer engagement, were now battlegrounds of anonymous accusations and fabricated horror stories about my products. Scam artist, one fake profile declared. Her artisanal soaps are just cheap chemicals, gave my child a rash. Another, don't trust her coaching, she's a fraud, steals content. Dozens of accounts. New ones popping up faster than I could block them, all with similar patterns, similar venom. It wasn't random negativity anymore. This was a targeted assault, a war waged by an invisible enemy. Mark found me slumped at my desk, staring blankly at the screen. He pulled my chair back, knelt beside me. "What is it, love?" His voice was a lifeline, but I felt too far gone to grab it. I showed him the email, the relentless barrage of comments. He scrolled through them, his brow furrowing deeper with each one. "This is insane," he muttered. "Who would do this?" He tried to be pragmatic, suggesting I report the accounts, hire a PR firm. We spent hours drafting polite, professional responses to the accusations, but they were swallowed by the sheer volume of hate. Every time we debunked a claim, 3 new ones materialized. Mark, bless his heart, understood the emotional toll, but he couldn't quite grasp the insidious nature of a purely digital attack. He came from a world of tangible problems, direct confrontations. This felt like fighting ghosts. It's like they know everything. I whispered the words, barely audible. My suppliers, my old clients, even details about my packaging process. A particularly nasty comment had appeared on a forum about small businesses, claiming I'd once failed a health inspection. That was a lie, but it was a specific lie, one that required inside knowledge of my early struggles. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a disgruntled customer. This was personal. This was someone who wanted to destroy me, not just my business. The next morning, I woke to a notification that made my blood run cold. A new account, TruthTeller212, had posted a photo of my front door, taken clearly from the street, captioned, "The fraud lives here. Don't let her fool you with her home-based facade." My address wasn't public. Only a handful of people knew it. This wasn't just a digital attack. It had crossed into my physical space, my sanctuary. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the despair. This was no longer about lost income. This was about my safety, my peace. Mark was furious, demanding we call the police, but I knew what they'd say. Online harassment is hard to prove. They wouldn't understand the digital breadcrumbs, the subtle patterns. As Mark paced, making calls to his lawyer, I felt a strange shift inside me. A dormant part of my brain, long quiet, began to stir. Before I built my business, before I met Mark, I had a different life. A life in cybersecurity. Years spent in server rooms, tracing IP addresses, dissecting malicious code, hunting down digital footprints. I'd walked away from that world, craving something creative, something tangible. But the skills, the instincts, they were still there, buried deep. I remembered the meticulous joy of unraveling a complex network, the satisfaction of unmasking an anonymous attacker, the frustration of being a victim, of feeling helpless, began to morph into a cold, fierce determination. I looked at the glowing screen, at the hateful words, the fake profiles multiplying like a virus. Then I looked at my shaking hands, not with pity, but with a new kind of resolve. I had a weapon they didn't know about, a skill set they couldn't anticipate. My mind began to race, not with panic but with calculations. IP addresses, metadata, timestamps, network logs. It wouldn't be easy. It would take time, dedication, and a level of digital forensics I hadn't touched in years. But I knew how to do it. The game had changed. I wouldn't just report them. I would hunt them. And as a name, a ghost from Mark's past, flickered into my mind, a chilling certainty began to form. This wasn't just an anonymous troll. This was someone I knew, and I was going to unmask them. The laptop became my battle station. I cleared my desk of fabric samples and design sketches, replacing them with a second monitor, a stack of blank notebooks, and my old, reliable external hard drive. It had been years since I delved into network forensics, but the muscle memory was still there, buried deep under layers of domestic bliss and creative pursuit. I started by logging every attack, the precise timestamps of the fake reviews, the IP addresses of the accounts leaving them, or at least the proxies they used, the exact wording of the malicious comments. It was a tedious, mind-numbing process at first, like trying to find a single thread in a mountain of tangled yarn. My first few attempts hit dead ends. The accounts were well masked, bouncing through multiple VPNs and public Wi-Fi networks. It felt like I was chasing ghosts. Every time I thought I had a lead, it dissolved into anonymity. The frustration was a constant hum, a gnawing anxiety that shadowed my every waking moment. Mark tried to help, offering to report the accounts, but he didn't grasp the depth of the digital camouflage. "Just ignore them, honey," he'd say, his voice kind but distant. "It's not worth your peace." He didn't see the systemic sabotage, the calculated destruction of everything I'd built. His well-meaning advice only amplified my isolation. This was my fight, and I had to wage it alone. The attacks, meanwhile, escalated. A local news blog, usually a gentle supporter of small businesses, ran a piece quoting anonymous sources claiming my products were substandard, and my customer service hostile. My sales plummeted by 30% in a week. Then came the direct messages to my personal social media, not just on my business profiles. They were laced with details about my life, things no stranger would know. You think you're so happy now, don't you? Enjoy it while it lasts. Some things you can't outrun. The words were chilling. A cold breath on my neck. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a disgruntled customer or a random troll. This was personal. This was someone who knew me, or knew enough about me to craft these specific stings. I shifted my focus. Instead of just IP addresses, I started looking for patterns in the content itself, the phrasing, the grammar quirks, the specific insults. It was like linguistic forensics. I built a database, cross-referencing every negative comment, every fake review, and then a flicker, a recurring, almost imperceptible detail. Several accounts, despite using different personas, consistently misspelled a particular word, a common error, but always the same one. And they all made a peculiar, almost archaic reference to a children's rhyme I hadn't heard since childhood. It was a specific rhyme, tied to a very niche memory. My blood ran cold. I remembered it instantly. A rhyme Mark's ex-wife, Sarah, used to sing to her younger sister, a habit Mark had once mentioned as endearingly odd. Sarah had a penchant for collecting antique children's books, a hobby she'd tried to get me interested in, back when we'd attempted to be civil. The connection was tenuous, a whisper in the digital noise, but it was enough to narrow my search. I started focusing on accounts that exhibited this specific linguistic fingerprint. My suspicion, once a vague shadow, began to solidify into a terrifying certainty. I delved deeper, tracking any public information associated with those specific accounts, no matter how small. I found one fake profile, Crafty Critic 33, that had left a particularly vicious review of my latest collection. It had 0 followers, no posts, just that one review. But when I dug into the cached data, I found a tiny, almost invisible digital breadcrumb. An old, forgotten avatar image, briefly used then deleted, still lingered in a search engine's cache. It was a blurry photo of a specific breed of rare, black cat, a breed I knew Sarah absolutely adored and had once owned. The air left my lungs. The dots connected with a sickening thud. Sarah. It had to be her. The subtle clues, the personal knowledge, the relentless, targeted nature of the attacks. It all fit. But a blurry cat photo and a misspelled word weren't enough, not for what I planned. I needed undeniable, irrefutable proof. I needed to trace an IP address directly back to her, not just a proxy. The game had changed. It was no longer about defending my business. It was about unmasking the ghost in the machine. I had a suspect, a motive, and a growing, chilling resolve. The full extent of her digital footprint, however, remained hidden, a labyrinth I had only just begun to navigate. The hunt was on, and I wouldn't stop until I had her. The screen glowed, a roadmap of connections I was building, piece by agonizing piece. My focus narrowed, the world outside my small office fading into a blurry periphery. I was no longer just me. I was a digital detective, a hunter on a cold trail that was finally beginning to warm. The vague suspicions from before solidified into a singular, undeniable target, Sarah. The thought sent a cold shiver down my spine, a mix of dread and a fierce, burning resolve. This wasn't just about my business anymore. It was about reclaiming my peace, my life, from a person who seemed determined to dismantle it, brick by insidious brick. I dove deeper, past the surface-level IP addresses I'd identified. Those were just entry points. I needed to trace the origin, the source behind the proxies and VPNs she was clearly using to mask her tracks. This was where my old skills truly came into play. Years ago, in a life I thought I'd completely shed, I'd been trained in network forensics, in dissecting digital footprints. It was like learning a forgotten language, each line of code, each timestamp, a word, forming sentences of undeniable truth. I started with the most aggressive attacks, the ones that had caused the most damage. I cross-referenced the dozens of fake social media profiles, the malicious review accounts, the anonymous email addresses. Each one left a tiny, almost imperceptible, digital breadcrumb. My workspace became a war room, multiple monitors displaying complex network logs, spreadsheets filled with IP addresses and timestamps, and notes scribbled on whiteboards, mapping out the convoluted web Sarah had spun. I looked for patterns, for anomalies, for anything that could link disparate accounts. Sometimes it was a specific browser user agent string that appeared across multiple platforms, even when the IP addresses differed. Other times, it was the subtle, almost imperceptible delay in posting times, suggesting a manual rather than automated process, always occurring within specific windows. The attacks continued even as I worked. A particularly vicious comment would pop up on my business page, then disappear, only to resurface minutes later from a different, fake profile. It was like she was toying with me, confident she was untouchable. One morning, I woke to find my personal contact number, clearly obtained from a private database, plastered across a public forum, accompanied by a fabricated story about my past. My stomach churned. This wasn't just sabotage, it was harassment, pure and simple. It fueled my determination, sharpening my focus. I worked through nights, fueled by coffee and a grim sense of purpose. Mark tried to pull me away, suggesting we go for a walk or that I get some rest. I'd nod, murmur agreement, then return to my screens the moment he left the room. He didn't understand the true nature of this war, the invisible enemy I was battling. He saw online comments. I saw an active, malicious campaign designed to destroy me. Then came the breakthrough. It wasn't a single aha moment, but a series of converging data points that formed an undeniable picture. I found a cluster of IP addresses, seemingly random and scattered across different cities, that consistently showed activity on her known social media accounts, and then, within minutes, initiated an attack on one of my platforms. I traced the routing of these IPs, peeling back layers of proxies, until I found a recurring endpoint. Not her home IP, but a specific, rarely used public library network in a town several hours away that Sarah was known to visit frequently for quiet work retreats, according to something Mark had once casually mentioned. It was a digital signature, unique and unmistakable. I then cross-referenced this with her known travel schedule, piecing together a timeline that matched every single major attack. The final, damning piece of evidence was a specific, obscure piece of metadata, embedded in a series of fake review images, a tiny digital watermark I recognized from a publicly available, free photo editing software she was known to prefer. When combined with the IP addresses, the timing, and the content of the attacks, it was irrefutable. Every single fake profile, every malicious comment, every saboteur action traced back to her. Not just a theory, not just strong evidence. Proof. I sat back in my chair, the hum of the computer fans the only sound in the room. The vindication was immense, a powerful wave washing over me. But it was quickly followed by a cold, hard anger. She had systematically tried to ruin me, had brought a level of malice into my life that felt alien and deeply personal. I looked at the mountain of evidence I had amassed, screenshots, meticulously time-stamped logs, network traffic analyses, cross-referenced data points. It was an airtight case, undeniable to anyone with even a basic understanding of digital forensics. My first instinct was to show Mark, to lay it all out, every single piece of her calculated cruelty. But then I hesitated. I pictured his face, his kind, gentle nature. He would be shocked, yes, perhaps even angry. But he also had a history of trying to mediate, of seeking the peaceful solution, especially when it involved Sarah. He might suggest a direct confrontation, a legal threat, something that would drag me back into her orbit, into a public spectacle I desperately wanted to avoid. I didn't want a fight. I wanted an end, a definitive, irreversible end that would ensure she could never touch my life again. I needed consequences that would land outside my world, outside Mark's influence, consequences she couldn't talk her way out of, or dismiss as misunderstandings. And that's when the new plan solidified, clear and chillingly effective. I wouldn't go to Mark, I wouldn't go to the police, I wouldn't even go to Sarah directly. I knew about her new in-laws. Mark had mentioned them, a prominent, deeply conservative family with significant social and financial influence. They valued reputation above all else. A scandal, especially one involving digital harassment and malicious intent, would be devastating to them, a stain on their carefully cultivated image. Their daughter-in-law, a pillar of their community, revealed to be a cyber stalker. The thought was almost perverse in its satisfaction. I spent the next few hours meticulously compiling the dossier. I organized the evidence into a clear, chronological narrative, each piece hyperlinked to its source. I wrote a concise, objective summary, devoid of emotion, simply stating the facts and presenting the irrefutable digital trail. Screenshots of her comments, side by side with her IP address logs, timelines of attacks coinciding with her known locations. It was a professional, damning package, designed to leave no room for doubt or denial. I even included a brief, clinical explanation of how the data was collected, preempting any claims of fabrication. My finger hovered over the send button, my heart thudding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. There was no going back from this. This wasn't just sending an email. It was detonating a quiet bomb, a precision strike aimed at the very foundation of her carefully constructed new life. The silence in the room stretched, thick with anticipation. I took a deep breath, the taste of vindication sharp on my tongue. This was it. This was my answer, my retribution, my freedom. I pressed send. The silence that followed hitting send was heavier than any of the hateful messages. My finger lingered over the mouse, a phantom echo of the click. The email, with its meticulously compiled evidence, was out there, a digital arrow loosed into the internet. I didn't know when or if it would hit its mark. The next few days were a blur of nervous energy. I checked my phone constantly, not for new attacks, but for any ripple, any tremor in the digital world. Nothing. The quiet was almost worse than the noise. It felt like holding my breath underwater, waiting for the surface. I forced myself to work, to fulfill orders for my candle business, but my hands trembled as I poured wax, my mind replaying every detail of the dossier, wondering if I'd missed anything, if the proof was truly undeniable. Then, a week later, the first sign appeared, subtle as a shadow. My sister-in-law, Mark's sister, called, her voice tight with a strange mix of gossip and concern. "Have you seen Sarah's Instagram?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "She's gone private, and all those photos from the Hamptons with her in-laws, poof, vanished." It wasn't direct, but it was a crack in the facade. Sarah, who lived for public validation, had retreated. This was significant. I mumbled something non-committal, thanked her, and hung up, a slow, cold satisfaction spreading through me. The arrow had found its target. Over the next few weeks, the whispers grew louder. Not about me, for once, but about Sarah. Friends of Mark, distant relatives, all seemed to have heard something. Sarah's in-laws are apparently furious. One mutual acquaintance shared during a chance encounter at the grocery store. Something about a major family disagreement. She's not even at their annual charity gala this year. Huge scandal. The details were vague, but the message was clear. Sarah's carefully constructed world was crumbling. Her in-laws, conservative and deeply image-conscious, valued reputation above all else. My dossier, detailing her calculated maliciousness, her online deceit, and her attempts to destroy my livelihood, had clearly struck a nerve. They weren't just influential, they were vindictive when crossed. As Sarah's public life dissolved, so did the online attacks against me. The fake accounts, once prolific, went dormant. The negative reviews stopped appearing, and some of the older, more egregious ones even began to disappear, likely taken down by the platforms after repeated legitimate reports, now that the coordinated effort had ceased. My business, which had flatlined for months, began to breathe again. New orders trickled in, then a steady stream. Positive reviews started to outweigh the negative, slowly rebuilding my reputation, one satisfied customer at a time. The relief was immense. a physical weight lifting from my shoulders. I could breathe deeply again without the constant threat of a digital ambush. Mark noticed the change, though he didn't know the full extent of my battle or the extreme measure I'd taken. He saw me smiling more, sleeping better, humming as I worked in my studio. "You seem lighter," he said one evening, pulling me into a hug. "Whatever was happening, it's finally over, isn't it?" I leaned into his embrace, burying my face in his chest. "Yes," I whispered, the truth in my voice deeper than he could ever know. "It's over." I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The victory was mine, a silent triumph forged in the digital shadows. He had supported me emotionally, but this was a war I had to fight and win on my own terms. My business didn't just recover, it thrived. The forced hiatus had given me time to refine my products, to innovate. I launched a new line of essential oil diffusers, inspired by the need for calm and peace I had so desperately sought. They sold out within hours. My online community, once a battleground, transformed into a supportive network. The experience, though harrowing, had taught me resilience, sharpened my resolve, and reminded me of a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The dormant IT security skills that had once felt like a forgotten past were now a part of my present, a quiet testament to my capability. I kept them sharp, a silent guardian against any future threats, though I knew none would come with the same insidious intent. Sarah eventually faded from my radar entirely. I heard through the grapevine that her marriage had strained under the weight of her in-laws' disapproval and the public scrutiny. She and her husband separated a few months later, and she moved out of state, losing not just her influential connections, but the very lifestyle she had flaunted. There was no gloating, no sense of malicious triumph on my part, just a quiet understanding that justice had been served, not through vengeance but through consequences. My aim was never to destroy her, but to stop her from destroying me, and in doing so I had inadvertently dismantled the very foundation of her carefully constructed life. One sunny afternoon, I stood in my studio, the scent of lavender and cedar filling the air. Orders were stacked neatly, ready for shipment. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Mark walked in, a mug of tea in his hand, and leaned against the doorframe, watching me. "You built this," he said, his voice full of admiration. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. He was right. I had built this, not just a business, but a life. I had faced the darkness, navigated the complexities of betrayal and digital warfare, and emerged stronger. The past was a chapter closed, its pages sealed. My future was bright, grounded in peace, purpose, and the quiet power of knowing I could protect myself. The only fingerprints I cared about now were my own, firmly pressed onto the life I was creating.